of biblical proportion. That storm was horrendous. I cannot even find words to really describe in full the intensity and the magnitude of that storm. I can only speak from my personal experience, and I can also speak for the people that lived in Landrell Point and in Pittstown in particular. Now, as far as we know, the other settlements, we can't really get any word out from the other settlements, but I helped with the Nurse Bueller, in the clinic, because the clinic was not so badly destroyed, so we used that as a shelter, as well as Sharon's home. And so a lot of the people had to come out because she said that the place was too congested, so they needed to find someplace else to stay. When I tell you, we moved from being a very lucrative island. Okay, we had a lot of tourists come in, business was booming every now and again. In the season, it was really the peak.
This is where now?
In October is the season. Everyone was preparing for the season. A lot of people invested their monies for the beginning of October. As a matter of fact, that's the reason why I moved from Nassau to Crooked Island to take advantage of the opportunity in October. Now, when that storm came in, oh my God, I can't even describe. Landrell Point right now is a no man's land. It is a no man's land. I was inside my house. As a matter of fact, we weren't fully aware that this storm was coming to us in the first place. Nobody had any, they didn't batten up and all of this stuff like that, okay, because we weren't properly aware of the storm. The winds came and we figured that we knew it was a storm out there, but every time you listen to the news, they would say that we would probably get some outer bands, but it would head north. So we didn't, do anything to protect the homes and what's not. Now, when that storm hit, I was inside my house, and the wind started to pick up slowly but surely. After things started to really escalate, I went into a closet to protect myself. Mr. Jones, the wind, I don't have words to describe the sound of that wind. That was monstrous. Trust me. I went into a closet to protect myself after I placed my mattress and stuff against the windows, because I said I knew that after I heard the breaking down of the roof outside of the house and downstairs, I said that I didn't want the winds to get into the room where I was. So I positioned myself in a closet, but I also protected the windows from the winds. That didn't help. The roof under me caved in. I was in a 2-story house. The roof under me caved in.
The floor?
The floor.
Yeah.
The bottom floor caved in, and then the roof above me also caved in. I prayed and I prayed because I was the only one in that house. I didn't have any kind of protection. There were some heavy mirrors on my wall. I remember when I moved in there, I asked a gentleman to help me lift those mirrors to just rearrange the house because it was too heavy. I don't know where the strength came from. I picked those windows up and I positioned them to the other windows that were bursting in to keep the wind from coming in. Then the ceiling started to come down. The central air unit, that started to come down. I said, okay, I have to lock myself up in here because I can't go there. You cannot leave the house. The best thing for you to do is to find a safe place. God had it so well. My cousin Mario Virgil, who lives in Acklands, he sent one of his friends. He said, if you are evacuating, please go to her because she's the only one in that house. She doesn't have any family, so to speak, in Crooked Island. I need you to go there and get out. And he escaped after his house collapsed. The roof really. He escaped with a baby. She didn't. The baby was about 3 months. She didn't have on any clothes. She just had her pampers on, and his wife, and they stopped it. He said he was calling me for at least half an hour. I didn't hear him. I heard him once. And I screamed for help. He said, come out. We have to leave now. By the time I got to my door and I moved the mattress and the burr and everything out of the way, the roof had already caved in on the stairs. There were glass all over the stairs. There was no way for me to come out of my house. I found some tennis. I put them on my feet, and I don't know, it was only God that helped me to get out of that place. When we got out of the door, the ocean moved from its place and run us down. He had heavy equipment that was very high. He said he would try to use that to get us from out of there because the ocean was swallowing us up. He climbed that up, and the minute he started to go forward, The ocean swallowed the truck. We had to get out. I said, we don't get out here, we are going to drown. He said, let's go. He put the baby on top of his head. And when I jumped out of the truck, because I'm kind of short, I went straight to the bottom. I can't swim. I started to find dog paddle my way. He said, there's a road over here. Come over here where the road is. And we was able to make it out. That was the first portion of the storm. We did not know that there was an eye over us. We figured that this was the end of the storm. That eye lasted for at least an hour and a half. Because we started to assess the damage. We moved around in vehicles and we said we were not informed. We were not properly informed. We were so stunned to see the devastation. This was only the first portion of this storm. After that, we decided that the homes were partly damaged. It was not really completely damaged, most of the homes. So we huddled in it was a group of us that moved into this one's home or that one home, and we just was talking about the ordeal, not knowing that the last half was the worst and was yet to come, and we did not know. After that, we were placed into a triplex just to accommodate us. This was the triplex that they usually use for the winter guests when they come over. So the roof was elevated just for elegance and what's not. So we were in this triplex. Okay, there were some in one unit, some in the next, some in the next, because their homes were kind of damaged. Thank God we were not warned. Had we been warned about this storm, we would have gone to the shelter, which was the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that is completely destroyed and demolished. We would have been dead in there. Trust me. The blocks, you can't find your way in there. The pastor was with us in the triplex. What ended up happening? We cooked food. We talked about the ordeal. We were so thankful to God that we made it, not knowing that the worst was yet to come. It started to rain. The wind started to beat. I said, I know something. The storm is not over. They said, no, ma'am, this is just backlash. Oh, you have to understand the detail of the storm, and these things happen afterwards. I say, trust me, I feel it. This storm is not over. When I looked, we had storm shutter windows, storm shutter door. We felt secured in that building. The ocean started to come. It started to come up on the dry land. The water started to elevate quickly. I'm talking about you couldn't speak fast enough. The water was rising and rising. I said, listen, I tell you all, the storm is not over. When the winds pick up, then they believed me. They said, now listen, we have to find a way that if this roof cave in, we can protect all of us in here. So the guys decided to pull out the fridge, and they made they put the mattress over the fridge, and they said if the roof cave in, all of us and the baby, we will go underneath this mattress to protect ourselves. The roof wasn't really the problem. It was the flood. We did not know. As the water started to elevate, it started to elevate above the windows. I have never seen anything like that in my life. When the storm shutters, all I hear, the storm shutters burst. Boof! The waters came flooding in. We said this washer, standing on this washer is not going to help. We moved the washer, we moved the dryer. We tried to put things to elevate ourselves enough to get into the manhole. They said we have to get into the manhole else people drown. This was no ordinary roof. You understand? Those guys, thank God we had guys the right height. We had people with the right brain. We had a variety of people who were skilled in different areas. Strength, height, wisdom, intelligence, all of that we had inside that room in order to get us in that roof. We put the woman and the child in the roof first. And they put me in, and then the guys, they climb up. We figured that we were safety in this room. This was the first unit of the triplex. The wind started to beat. Thank God. I don't know what happened. But there was one gentleman that was with us. He grabbed a hammer. Thank God for him. He didn't even know why he picked the hammer up. The first unit, the storm started to beat so bad, the floor beneath us caved in. We were standing on the rafters. So that portion left. We had a hammer. We break the wall from the first unit into the next unit. We screamed to see if anybody else was in the roof. In the second unit, someone shouted and said there were a couple of us in that unit. There was a man who had his mother. She had one leg. They lift her into that roof. He had his wife and two other small children. We break over into the second unit and we met up with them. Then that unit started to cave in. We had to break over into the third unit. We beat the blocks out of the way, got into the second unit. That caved in. We had to move over. When we move over, we said, Lord, the water started rising. I talk about unbelievably. I can't describe to you the sound of the water. It seems as if the winds had foot. It was beating on the roof like it was coming to get you. Listen to me, that storm had judgment in it. That was no ordinary storm. That had a warning in it. It was almost like your goose has come home to cook. That's the kind of feeling you got from the storm. Okay, now I don't know too much about the island and how the people lived and whatnot. I'm not saying that it was judgment, but that's how it felt. There was a pastor that was also in the roof with us. At the end of the night, when we moved over to the final unit, because the 2 units had already caved in the roof, it was 13 of us all together. The front portion of the roof had already gone. The sheetrock had already caved in. They told us to be careful not to walk on that, else we would fall in. We had someone like a watchman. We say, well, how is the water level? The water level was already in the roof. The babies were crying. They said, listen, we are going to drown in here. We have to break out of this roof. I said, if we go outside, the winds was blowing. To me, it was like at least 170, 180. It was powerful out there. Someone grabbed a log and started to break out the roof. The roof would not give. They had a hammer on the wood trying to break out the roof. All of us standing on the rafters. This woman had 2 small children. One was 2 and the next one was 3. I felt more for that lady than myself, because it was only me one and I was just trying to survive, but she couldn't leave her children. The man, he said he couldn't leave his mother. She was a hindrance. She only had 1 leg.
Wow.
You understand? We can't move, all of us. We have to choose. What are you going to do? And no one wants to leave their children. No one wants their babies to have to go out in that wind with no clothes on. So as we tried to break it over the roof, God had it so that the roof didn't give. We were able to make a small hole in the roof, but the roof didn't give. So we decided we would hang on to the rafters. We stood on those rafters for at least approximately 19 hours. We lay on those rafters. We shifted the elderly lady with the 1 leg. Every now and again, we made sure that she was positioned well, because it was very uncomfortable up there in those rafters. The wind blew the front portion of the triplex away, but it stopped where we were. But you know something? I sat on those rafters, and the lady said, I said, God, I give up. We're going to drown in here. This was it. But the lady said, what time is it? We said it was about 2:30. She said tide was supposed to drop at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Let's wait and see if the tide would drop so that we wouldn't drown. Let's not try to get out of here. So we said, okay, we'll wait to see if the tide drop. But the water keep rushing, the wave, because it was a powerful current out there. It was crazy. We stood on those rafters and we held on, the 13 of us. We said no one was going to die in here. But you know what it felt like? I remember having a book, and I know that every Bahamian could attest to that, because we claim to be a Christian nation. Many of us know the story of Noah. In that place, it felt like we were in the Ark of Noah. Because even the way the rafters were positioned, it reminded me of how the rafters look in my storybook of Noah. And something just said to me, Sean, it is time to get into the act of safety. The same way that this storm creep up on us suddenly and unprepared, so shall it be with the coming of the Lord. Get into the act of safety. So it had a spiritual significance behind it. You understand? Now, the water stood still for a while, and it didn't climb anymore. So we were able to kind of sit there. We got wet up, but we didn't mind. The lady, she was so afraid with her 2 children. Her stomach gave way, and she defecated on herself. She tried to pass, and she defecated even on me. The elderly lady, she was messed up. I was messed up. We were so frightened, so we had to deal not only with the wind, the waves, being afraid, but we also had to deal with the stench of all of that in that roof. There was a pastor that was with us. He stood on that rafter with a lantern because we didn't have any light. He stood for the complete 19 hours. He was almost like a guardian angel. Then when I looked, the water started to recede. Thank God. Someone came in the boat. There was a couple of men. They came in the boat to the roof, and they tried to evacuate us out, but they couldn't at the time because the water was still too high. So they said that they would come back and they would get us. And after things kind of died down a bit, he came back and he got us. Thank God. And after we were evacuated out of that building, the place was a mess. We couldn't believe our eyes. The clinic was not too badly damaged. Like I said earlier, the majority of people stayed by Sharon. Let me tell you how devastating, how drastic this was. We didn't even have clothes. Sharon has a house. Her store was completely demolished also. She has a clothing store. But she gave us clothes out of her own drawer. It was so much of a humbling experience that we had to ask. I personally, she told me that she couldn't give all of the panties out because she had other women that she had to give, so she could only give me one panties. She gave me one panties and a dress. After the storm subsided, we remembered where stores were. We went to those locations, and you should see us scavenging in the grounds, under debris, under trees, under rocks, boulders, trying to find a can of tuna, trying to find a can of tomato paste or some mackerel or something like that. Some were even looking for sanitary napkins that were drenched in the water so they couldn't even use. It was horrible. And up to this day, because the island is not accessible. See, people don't really understand what is going on, and it really frustrates me and it gets me angry to hear the level of stupidity of some of our Bahamian people who is speaking about Crooked Island, and they were not there to experience it, and they said that it is not that serious. It is upsetting to me. The home that I was in was much closer to the sea than that house, than the triplex.
So this was a real tsunami.
This was a tsunami. They said that this water was salt water. This wasn't rainwater. This was ocean water. But somebody explained to me that I think there's a pond or a lake or something further in the back somewhere that you can't really see driving. And so they said that water also came up and added to, I'm talking about 10-foot seas. It was horrible, and especially with those children, but I know they were going to die. Let me tell you something also, Mr. Jones. I thank God for Miss Beulah, who is the nurse in Landville Point at the clinic. Many people use the clinic for shelter. You know what I did? A lot of the canned goods that I pick up along the street, I couldn't tell you what I pick up because it didn't have a paper on it. When I opened up, some had tomato paste, some had mackerel, some had fruit cocktail. We didn't know what we had. But I went and I asked a guy, his name was Ed. I said, Ed, you know, there was a young lady, she had about 4 children. I said, and it's only me, I'm by myself, and I know how to survive. I said, but I want to be a blessing to this young lady. Can you give me 2 fish? This was the most powerful experience of all of this. He said, okay, I have 2 snappers. They were medium-sized snappers. He said, I'll give these to you, but just remember me when you cook, me, my wife, and the baby. I said, okay, no problem. I went in there, I found a gas stove. I took a couple of pots out of his yard that had blown away. And I said I was going to go to the clinic and I was going to cook a meal. When I cooked that meal, I found a bag of rice also. I cooked, and his wife gave me a cabbage that was ready. It was partly rotten, but I didn't mind. I would peel off whatever and use that. And I made a meal for me, the lady, and her 4 children. And let me tell you, when the people in Landville Point smelled that was a meal for them. They huddled around that house. They went around the clinic. And I started to feed. I didn't care. I started to feed and I started to feed. This was a modern day miracle, Mr. Jones. Because guess what? She told me, Sean, that was only 2 snappers. You need to cut those snappers in half. You see how much people out there? I said, let me tell you something. I'm a person of faith. And I don't care. We're going to cook. We're going to feed these people a full meal. And every time I look over in the pot, there was another fish head. Every time I look over in the pot, there was another fish tail. Every time I look over, it was another. I said, Jesus, the fish multiplying. Everyone, at least 80% of the people in Landville Point was able to eat out of that one pot. That was a miracle. And I even had a piece of fish head leave over. That is how faith works.
Wow.
I had a piece of fish head leave over. That was more than God. And they were able to eat from the things that we collected from the ground, and we brought there. Tuna. Whatever we had. The other day before I left, before the guy came in, he was a British gentleman. He said that he was doing these evacuations and what's not. He was attending to the Bahamas when they had cases of emergency for over 12 years. This was the worst disaster he's ever seen. And Crooked Island in Landville Point in Pittstown was the worst among all of the islands. He said that yes, we brought over goods. And also Pittstown, there were persons that brought goods over to Pittstown, but we cannot get to it. The goods could not, it cannot get to us. He said that if you don't not evacuate, it's going to be about 10 days before you all start to starve to death. You'll need to get out of here immediately. It felt safer where we was. It was, I can't, sometimes I really get lost for words, or I get really emotional even having to think about it, because I thank God that my daughter wasn't with me, but I also sympathize with people who had children in there with them, because it wasn't like you have to do all that you can do to survive, like how it was with me. It was me and 2 other children. I'm not saying me, but I'm talking about the other lady. It was her and her 2 other children.
And you said that there was an elderly lady.
Yes, it was
with one leg.
Yes, it was a gentleman. That was his mother.
So where did he put her? Did he pull her?
He braced her. He had a wood that he had her positioned on, and he braced himself on the rafter, and he had her somewhat leaning up to him, and she was twist somewhat to the side. So every now and again he would keep rotating her so that, because it was very uncomfortable on the rafters. It was uncomfortable for me that I didn't have anyone positioned on me. So I could imagine how it was for him.
It's amazing that you didn't have any fatalities.
It was, listen to me, I don't give anyone credit. I don't care about the atheists. I don't care about anyone's personal opinions about whether God lives or not. That speaks volumes of the fact that there is a God. Something dropped into my spirit and said, Sean, if you only saw the angelic activities that night, it was amazing to see how they saved everyone. On the rafters, we said that we know that there were casualties. We knew for a fact that someone had to die in this. Let me tell you what was so amazing, Mr. Jones. When I was leaving, there was a little puppy. Oh, I hated this little puppy. He was a neighbor's dog. He always tormented me when I came home from work. And I used to run. I said, "Man, come from around me, booby, man. I was tired seeing you." After the storm, before I left, Booby came to the door. I said, "Let me secure this dog." I said, "Go in the house." The dog shake his head and walk backwards. I said, "Well, you know something? I can't be bothered with you. I have to go." After the storm was over and I revisited the home, guess who I saw coming out of the woods? Booby. I was so excited. I said, "Booby!" Yeah. Oh, I was excited to see that dog. The Bible says that life is far more important than clothes. Why worry about these things? Okay? You have a lot of people who would ask, where's God, when they lose their homes that they took years to build, businesses that they spent so much years and monies investing trying to establish these businesses. And they lose them and they wonder, where's God? But they fail to realize that they are alive. I lost my house. I lost my car. I lost every clothing that I had. I told you, down to the underwear I had on, I borrowed. But I was grateful to God that my life was spared. Had that man not called my name and I heard him, I had already made up in my mind that I was not leaving that house until after the storm. But I was able to survive.